We should start by just, I'd say, saying thank you and how appreciative we are to the people that helped us in this process. The draft is always a huge undertaking, and there's so many months worth of work that go into, one selection, let alone the entire weekend. But Dave and his staff, the scouts, everybody in the personnel department, the coaching staff, the contributions that they made, the people that were here before Dave and I got here, the people that came here, after we were hired, really banded together, and I thought did a tremendous job of preparing us in a short time. Your first draft's always a tough challenge, and you're in a kind of a crunch time frame. You're trying to change some things, terminology, you change systems on offense, defense, and special teams, and there's some inherent challenges that go along with that. But I thought the attitude and the commitment and the effort that everybody put in was tremendous, and representative of the kind of effort that we're looking for from everybody in the organization. And they did a great job of really putting that forward here in this draft cycle here.
Yeah, I concur with all of that. This was a good first run for us, and just like all first runs, there's things that you learn too, and things that we'll go back and we'll, like we do with every process, we'll go back and look at what went well, what areas we need to improve, and then come up with solutions to the areas that we need to improve. And I'm talking about the whole process, that starts way back in the fall, and then that ends up on, that finishes up today. And it was a good experience going through it with Josh. Obviously, we've known each other for a long time, but it was a cool experience too to do it together, and we had fun. And we'll see where it goes from here. So.
Think of how the process started. The Wednesday, Thursday didn't start till obviously the second day. But when you look at the beginning and where you're at now, are you 100% satisfied with the plan you laid out? Were there some things that you had to tweak here and there? You obviously made some moves today. How do you feel after the fact, based on the original game plan?
Yeah, I'd say based on the original game plan, we feel like things went well, and at the same time, feel like there's going to be things that we're going to want to improve on from a process standpoint, and things that we'll tweak, and things that we'll modify. And we haven't even spoke about all those things yet. I mean, we'll kind of, take some time to reflect on it for a few days and go back. But it was solid, and there'll be things that we'll want to get better at the same time.
I think there's an element too of, you stick to your process, and and Dave's laid it out for us, and we've done a good job of going back and forth, discussing who the right people are to take and evaluating all those players. And really, there's no right or wrong at this point. We took the players that we felt were the best players at that position, when we were picking at that time in the draft, and now it's time to work and develop those people. And what we do from here on out will have a lot to do with how we look back on each selection and what we think of it, moving forward.
You guys double dipped at a couple different positions. I think 3 positions: defensive line, offensive line, running back. Was that just a matter of, again, like you guys kind of reiterate, best players available at that particular spot in the draft? And is that kind of how that played off, or more indicative of maybe some needs that were at those groups?
I would say, that's exactly how it played out. Those were the players that, at that time, we felt were the best available players, and so we took those players. That's the philosophy that we talked about going in, that we wanted to stick to, and that's what we did, and that's where we ended up at those spots.
Where's the discipline, or is there discipline needed to sometimes adhere to that as strictly as you guys try to adhere to it?
I think once you make the decision to do that, I think really it starts a long time prior to the draft beginning, and understanding what it is when you say that, what does it mean? When we take the quote unquote best player, each organization is going to evaluate these players differently, and we're not all going to have the same grades on the same players. We understand that, and we try to do the best we can of evaluating what the player would be for the Raiders. It doesn't really matter what they would be for any other team. It's in our system, the way we saw the players, the way we scouted them, the way we evaluated them, the way we would use them. This is the grade that was on that player, and that there's a lot of work that goes into each grade. And so when you trust the work, and then you get to the draft and you say, listen, it's the best thing to do for us is to add the best players we can, and if you understand that from the beginning, the process itself is kind of simplistic. You know, I'm not saying that there's not guys with the same grade and you have to make a choice, but when you really follow it and you say, listen, let's take the best players that we graded, that we thought all year long, gave us the best opportunity to improve our football team. That's what we try to do each step of the way. And, I think we're happy with, look, every spot on our team's going to have competition. Whether we drafted somebody or didn't draft somebody, there's competition at every spot on the team. I don't care what the spot is, and that's what we've tried to do that, in each spot that we could. Free agency, draft, we'll continue to try to do that. Dave and his staff are going to comb the college free agent thing. We're going to go into, the summer, and we're still going to try to do that. So that won't ever stop.
In that same vein, you said you picked players that are the best fit for this team, for this scheme. It just seemed like there was a bit of a theme there. You have 4 linemen who can all play the interior on the defense and the offense, and a couple of running backs who can run between the tackles. Is that kind of was that a theme that you saw coming in, or just kind of lay out that way?
Yeah, I don't think it was a theme we saw coming in. That's just kind of how it ended up working out. Those were the players that were available. Just like Josh said, everybody has certain types of players that you look for, right? Every certain teams like a certain style of, whether it be a certain style of running back, a certain style of offensive lineman, defensive lineman, corner, whatever it is. So, those are going to maybe drive in terms of like what we like maybe versus what someone else's values. But at the end of the day, we didn't go in and set out a plan and say, hey, we're going to draft interior linemen and interior, offensive linemen and power running backs. That's how it kind of came together. Those were the players that were there. Those are the players that we felt fit the system, and then we selected them.
When you take a kid like Zamir, who's been through so much in his life and adversity, does that kind of, in your dealings with him, show you how he can take the hardships of, it's not easy to make this league or play in this league, and a kind of kid like that who can fight through things?
Well, I think that one thing that is an attractive trait is when you have people that have went through different transitions in life and have had to go through different adversities in life and have come out the other end and have succeeded. Those are positive traits, whether that's people that we add to our staff or, people that you add to your football team. Because this business, right, there's a lot of adversity in this business. There's a lot of ups and downs when it comes to, being a professional athlete or being a coach or just, being in the football business in itself. And so if you've experienced some of those things and you've dealt with them in an appropriate way, and your emotional intelligence, you showed high emotional intelligence to be able to handle those things. I think those are, indicators that you can handle the grind and the ups and downs that come with becoming a professional athlete or working in professional sports.
You guys have been friends for a while anyway, both, in football and off. How much fun was this to run a draft together, or was there stress? Was there kind of like back and forth? How would you describe how these past 3 days worked, the two of you?
It was a lot of fun. There was one moment that in particular that, it was our first draft selection. I thought Dave was getting choked up on the phone when he was talking to Dylan. He was actually choking, he was having a hard time. He had something in his throat.
Need my water.
No, but we had a lot of fun. We've tried to do this, though, I would say every day as much as we can with one another and with the people that are in the building. I think people would tell you that that's kind of the atmosphere that we're trying to, create here, and they do a great job of reciprocating it to us. We're not off limits for the fun, but we've always enjoyed working together, and this was a new opportunity, a new challenge, a new event for us that we've never really experienced together in these positions. We've experienced it together, just not doing it this way, but. I would say we enjoyed the process leading up to this draft. We enjoy the people that we've, worked with hand in hand to put this together. And then we enjoyed, the last 3 days. I would say, it's kind of, it's just, these are special events regardless, and so for us to have an opportunity to share this is just one of hopefully many that we get to share together.
Mm-hmm. With Neil Farrell and Matthew Butler, it feels like both of those guys took turns in the right direction this last year for them. Where maybe lights went on or they stepped up their level of play. How important is that in your process of ascending players that are still showing some ceiling along the way and that are ascending in the right direction?
Yeah, it's an important quality that you want to see. You want to draft players that are improving. I mean, everybody's developing, college players, pro players, things of that nature. But obviously, you want to see a college player comes in at 18, 19 years old, and you ideally want to see a player that has gradually improved their body, improved their football intelligence, have improved as players, and have kind of have this upward trajectory. And so, having players that have done that, that's an attractive trait, and you want to, you want guys that you can develop and grow, and when they've shown that they've done that at the college level, you have an anticipation you're going to be able to continue to go down that path with them once you get them on your team.
I'm guessing there's players you fall in love with during the whole process. Is it hard to keep that in check? And during this last 2 days, guys you really liked a lot, but maybe aren't the best player available or aren't the fit, but you guys really think are going to be big time players going forward?
There's a human element to the draft. We get to meet a lot of players and meet a lot of people as we go through this process, whether they came here, we saw them at the combine, we did some Zoom interviews with them, what have you. And, there's guys you really enjoy, and unfortunately there's, hundreds and hundreds of people that you meet, and, we drafted 6, so there were a couple, when they get taken off the board at times where you're kind of like, maybe he'll be here, maybe he'll not, but I think what you learn is to just, each one of those things happens. And I've always looked at it where, the process you go through for the draft, it doesn't end at the draft if the player goes to some other team, because players' careers a lot of times last 6, 8, 10, 12 years. And we've had many players that, we don't get the draft, but then eventually we get to coach them. And so the work that we put in, the relationships that you start to build during this process, they don't always end right here. You're going to see them, you're going to compete against them, and at some point or other you may cross paths again. So all's not lost. But yeah, there's definitely some feeling, I would say, for some guys for sure, whether that be a skill or a talent or just a sentimental aspect of it because of something that they've gone through, and you're pulling for them and cheering for them, and hope they do well.
Was there any, maybe some pleasant surprise that Bayer was still there in the 7th round? Bayer won.
Yeah, I mean, I know the offensive tackle position in itself is a position, like the supply and demand of that position is, it's tough. You look at it in free agency, and it's a tough position to play, and again, there's just not a lot of human beings that have that size, length, athletic skill set to play tackle, and to have a tackle like that was there, that played in the Big Ten for Ohio State and played against a lot of good talent. And did a solid job, in those matchups. It was to have a tackle there that had, I'd say, that resume was an attractive thing. Now, obviously, he'll have to come in and show what he can do at the professional level. His college career is over, but again, seeing a tackle, that we both had evaluated and thought was obviously a good player was good to see.
The fact that he was okay with moving to guard that last year, even though sometimes that might, from your guys' perspective, not look as good because you're looking for a tackle. But what does that tell you about him being able to just be okay with going to guard for his last year, and that's the last tape that he's putting out there?
Well, I think he did whatever was best for the team. And I don't know the exact details of that situation, but we've talked about it before, and I know most teams do. You want to get your best 5 on the field and figure out a way to do that. And the fact that he had the flexibility and the unselfishness to do that, that's a positive trait.
Between free agency and the draft, I think you guys have added more defensive linemen so far this offseason than any other position. Why was that such a high priority position group going into this offseason?
We didn't have many on the roster to start with. So I think part of it was just, where it was, came in and, Hank was unrestricted free agent and Quentin was an unrestricted free agent. There was a lot of opportunity at that position. So I think just the combination of when we came in, what the depth chart looked like initially, and then just trying to take a few swings here, whether it be free agency, and then it happened to happen that way in the draft. Like I said, we're going to need some depth there in camp anyway. We're going to improve the competition at each position that we can, and I think we've put a group in there that'll do that now.
Similar question on the running backs. You guys have a ton on the roster now. Was that an important thing to have going into training camp, have that depth at that position?
I would say running back's just a tough position in the league. You know, those guys take a pounding, and it's a physical position, and you know, being able to add, you know, young players there to compete, to see if they can find a role. And again, it goes back to what was available, you know, and the best players that were available. You know, when it was our turn to pick, and you know, there was Zamir was there and Britton was there, and so we selected those players. If it would have been, you know, different, if there was other players there, if it would have been, you know, 2 tight ends or 2 receivers that happened to be there that were our, you know, who we thought were the best available at the time, we would have taken those players too. So it was kind of a product of the way that the board fell. But again, you can never have enough good players at any one position. We've talked about it from the beginning. We want to build depth and competition. That's going to be a very important part of this program. And it was an opportunity to take some swings and add 2 good players that happened to be at the running back position.
Yeah, most camps we're going to have at minimum 6 and probably more likely 7 at that position anyway. And it just so happens that we're kind of at that number. So we're working towards what we're going to eventually need anyhow. And, you know, each position's at a little bit of a different stage in terms of finalizing it. But the backs are, you know, it's just one of many that we're going to have to, you know, figure out how to, you know, fill it out as we go towards training camp here.
So Dave, I'll tread lightly to piggyback on that question with respect to what you said yesterday about the 5th-year option guys, because you said you weren't going to comment, but I was going to ask about the running backs and adding to with as many as you already had, and Josh saying today that every position there's a competition. Does that mean that the running back position, it's up for grabs at this point, and it's anybody's job as far as the number one?
You know, I think what we look at when we evaluate every position, again, is there's the way that we look at all positions. There's different roles to be filled. You have sub running backs, you have change of pace running backs, you have first and second down running backs, and so there's going to be different roles to fill throughout that position group. You could look at, you know, defensive tackle. You're going to have guys that play in sub, guys that play in base. Same thing at linebacker, so on and so forth. So there's different roles, and there's going to be competition for those roles. And so, however that ends up filling out, it fills out. And you know, we have a lot of talented players there, and so we always want everybody to compete. You know, everybody, we want to have that mentality that they're competing for a spot and are motivated to compete for playing time and things of that nature. And running back will be no different.
Before the draft, you talked about, you know, the offensive line being a developmental position. You noted the resume that Thayer's got. Parham also a 4-year starter. How much did that play into it? Just the experience that those guys have, you know, selecting them.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, when you have players that have a lot of experience, there's a lot of tape to see. You can see that progression, and you can see that development that we talked about. And so I wouldn't say it's like something like specifically that's like, okay, these guys have started this amount of time and that makes them more valuable. But what you do see oftentimes at the college level is guys get to move around and play different spots over their time, the longer that they're there, because, you know, at the college you're bringing different recruits in, and again, you're trying to get the best 5 on the field. So a guy ends up playing tackle for a certain amount of time, and he plays guard, then he plays center. You know, Munford played tackle and played guard. So I think the longer you're there, what's naturally happening a lot of times in college is you're getting an opportunity to see players play at different spots. And again, we've talked about versatility at that position being important. And so, you know, we are able to see that on those players. And again, that versatility is an important trait.
Going back to Josh's opening comments, you guys jumped in here in January and had to meld together a bunch of different people and philosophies and all that with no time to spare. How seamless was that process? And were you pretty pleased at how that all kind of played out?
It wasn't seamless in terms of just getting everything the way that you want it, but I would say that the part that was seamless for us was, I'd say, the effort and the attitude that everybody had coming in here every day trying to get it right, you know, and that's all we can ask of anybody, of ourselves, of each other. And so I think we're very pleased with kind of the direction we're headed in that regard. And, you know, now, like Dave said, it's going to take us a little time to reflect, take some time to think about each step of the way, you know, and then take those ideas and thoughts together and try to figure out, all right, what can we do next year to make it? We've already talked about a few things today, you know, in the draft room, just, you know, minute things, but it's part of the process in terms of trying to improve our process, you know, as we go into the draft season next year. And we're going to try to do that every step of the way. And phase 2 will be the next phase, and we'll do the same thing when we finish phase 2.
Going back to Zamir, what excites you about him as a prospect, and why you guys took him today?
He's played against a real high level of competition. He's a physical, tough downhill runner. He's got burst and speed, and he'll be physical and blitz pickup. They didn't throw him the ball a ton, but he's got adequate ability in the passing game. But just a tough kid who's, as Dave's already mentioned, overcome some adversity. Has really made a tremendous career for himself at Georgia, overcoming what he had to overcome, and he's going to bring some skills into that running back room, and I know he's going to compete his butt off and try to earn whatever role he can. But I also know he's an unselfish kid with a great attitude and loves football, and whatever we ask him to do, I'm sure he's going to do it with a great mindset and great work ethic, and looking forward to seeing him here when he gets here.
Two more, we'll go Willie then Paul.
Josh, at your introductory press conference, you were asked about the difference between your first stint as a head coach and now, and you're talking about a lot of the lessons that you had learned and sort of matured and grew as a coach. I'm curious how you went into this draft process. Did you think about back then, and did you take some lessons learned into this?
Yeah, I've thought about it every step of the way here, and I'd say a big part of that for me is I'm just part of the process, and we all are. And so, accepting what's my role in that process and try to do the best I can, and then having great trust and faith in the people that are responsible for other things. Dave headed up the entire process in the draft, and so I'm just, whatever I'm responsible for, try to do the best I can at that role, and really, I'm, like I said, I'm no different than anybody else, and having a part of the responsibility, but also sharing in it with other people and letting them do their job has been great for me. This whole spring has been a growth opportunity for me, just to try to put some of those things that I've learned over time into place as the head coach, and I'll continue to do that moving forward.
Dave, how satisfying was it to, roll your sleeves up and work the phones, make a couple trades and get that extra pick?
Yeah, we talked last night. We, made the trade where we added the extra 5th round pick, and we thought that was going to give us some flexibility. It was either going to give us another swing, in the 5th round, or give us some flexibility to move around the board. And so it ended up, we were able to use that extra pick and have some flexibility to get back into the 4th round. And those are exciting opportunities, when you feel like you've manufactured, an opportunity to again, improve the team or go get a player that you want. And overall, it was a cool experience. It was a lot of fun to get in there and have an opportunity to be with Josh and kind of head it up together and make some trades and again add some players that you were excited to add. So overall, it was cool to go through it. We'll improve it, but we had a lot of fun.
All right, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you in a few weeks.
See you.